I'm gonna show you 5 simple actions that you can implement into your game today, so you can finally bring your chess to the next level. If you are gonna religiously follow these 5 rules, I guarantee you're gonna make a huge progress in chess. What's up, chess player? Welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. It's so amazing how just one game of chess can be so instructive. I have played this game a few days ago in a tournament against a 2250 100 rated player, and this one started with me playing as white the Queen's Gambit here, and my opponent took the pawn immediately on c4, and that is called the Queen's Gambit accepted, and I'm gonna share with you what happened in this game because that would be very beneficial for you. So I played e3 immediately, I'm attacking that pawn. Queen's Gambit, I never really consider it to be a gambit because you don't really sacrifice that pawn for a long time. In 99% of the cases you get it back pretty much immediately, but they still call it a gambit. Whatever. e6, that is the main move, I take it, and black plays a6. The idea is very clear. They want to play b5, place their bishop on b7, and be, very strong here, very powerful piece on b7, just controlling the entire diagonal. And of course, the main idea afterwards is to play the move c5, so that they attack my center, because right now I have 2 central points against just 1. That's usually a very good thing. Like, if I would be able to play, I don't know, bishop d3 and e4 simultaneously here, that would be already a huge achievement because I have 2 very strong central points. At the same time, that would make d4 pawn a little bit more vulnerable. Right now I have a very solid pawn chain here. So I'm saying, you know what, you want to play b5, bishop b7, and whatever your plan is, go on. I'm gonna just focus on the development, because development is the key to success in the opening. And here we come to the first rule that you must always follow in your games. Follow the golden rule of development: one piece, one move. Notice I have developed my knight and my bishop so far, and whereas my opponent is doing something weird with those pawns, not developing the pieces, I just want to be as fast as possible with my development. I am already castling. Castling is also a part of the development because, first of all, you bring your king into the safety. That's very important in chess. It's like making sure that your family is in safety at home, so you can fully concentrate on what's important for your business and go on with that. So that is exactly what we are doing with the king here. And we also help this rook to be developed because, of course, it's now free to go somewhere to the center to support our attack. My opponent goes on with his plan, which is b5, attacking my bishop. That is basically the only case, or one of the exceptions, when you need to break that golden principle, move one piece, because, well, here you have to do something about this bishop. You cannot just say, well, I have learned that rule, so it's a necessary sacrifice. I have just to continue, knight is free, and we are good to go. No, you need to take into account what your opponent is doing, and every time your opponent makes a move, you should actually stop thinking about all of your ideas, all of your plans that you previously had, and try to focus on his move. What is he trying to achieve? Of course, in this case, it's very obvious, but in some cases, it might not be that obvious. Like, you might think, well, he's just wanted to develop one of his pieces, nothing special, but in fact, he might create a threat at the same time. So you need to be very careful, always pay attention to what your opponent is doing. You never play chess alone. So I'm going back with my bishop. I wanted to go to d3 because, remember, I have this e4 idea that was on my agenda and I was going to prepare, because all of the most important actions in chess are happening in the center. You always want to keep an eye on it, and you always want to be the one who is controlling the center, because who controls the center has the power. So yeah, that would be great for me to get those pawns, but of course my opponent, well, he also has his ideas. He wants to attack my center. So first of all, I played this move a4. That is just a move to shake some balance here, to get some useful squares for me, because the pawn is hanging and you do not really want to take it, because then you disconnect your pawns on a and c file. That's not usually a good thing for you. The a6 is going to become a weakness because I'm going to attack it like 3 times there with my queen, with my rook, and yeah, you always need to keep an eye on it. You cannot develop your knight that easily. That's not what you want to achieve. And you also don't want to protect it, because that's gonna block your bishop. This pawn is very passive here. It should be on c5, definitely. So the only way to deal with it for black is to play b4. But that is a certain plus for me, because I get the c4 square. which is now at my disposal, and still those pawns are a little bit disconnected. Maybe a6 is going to be a weakness in some variations. So it's useful to remember moves such as a4 that might be very, very useful. But don't overdo it, because you might say, well, now I want to continue with the move a5 just to make sure those pawns are disconnected, and yeah, maybe control some squares here. That's a bad strategy. Why? Because you break the golden rule of development. One piece, one move. And it also applies to pawns. Don't make any unnecessary moves with the same pieces, because, well, if black plays a5, that weakens that b5 square, which will be very important if you want to play c5. And also black spends yet another tempo on that, so you win that time. Time is your most important resource, both in chess and in life, so please keep an eye on it and don't waste it for some stupid parties like this move a5. Instead, do your development. Queen goes to e2. Now it's a multi-purpose moves, and in chess you always want to try to make as many multi-purpose moves as possible. So the queen is active here, keeping an eye on this pawn. For example, if you want just to normally develop your pieces, then this pawn might be hanging. Or you need to play a5, which once again is wasting time, which is also great for us and giving us the control of this b5 square. Then the queen also prepares the move e4, which is of course my first goal to attack in the center. So my opponent immediately tries to put pressure on it. Before I do that, because now e4 would be a mistake, that would just lose a pawn. So once again, never just blindly go on with your plan. Try to take a look at what your opponent is doing and decide whether it's dangerous for you. If it is, do something about it. If it's not, just ignore it and go on with your plan. Well, that's quite dangerous for me, so I decided to take it immediately. And that is, as you can see, not the best line here. I could have just developed my knight here to g2, but I really wanted to take it so that after bishop takes, I have this opportunity to play e4. That was my plan. Even though the engine says, well, black could have played knight bd7, that was the best thing, and then maybe take it with the knight. My opponent said, well, both are possible, but yeah, I do feel like it is a little bit less comfortable for me. If the knight appears there, it's going to be very, very active. Anyway, the game goes on with bishop takes, and now I play e4. Once again, I break the golden principle, because this move moves twice now, but every time I do it for a very, very concrete reason. I need the control of the center. You remember how important that is. I block that guy on b7, which is extremely powerful, and I plan even to go forward one day, attack that knight, get even more space and those squares for my pieces in the future. It could be very beneficial, for example, if black castles. Let's say here I just play e5, the knight goes somewhere, and then I immediately have this typical sacrifice with bishop takes h7. That is how important it is to control the center, because it gives you additional opportunities. Now the king takes, knight takes, and then queen comes to h5, and it's basically not possible to stop the checkmating attack. And that is another exception where it might be worse to break that golden principle of development, because you basically create a checkmating attack. But only in case you really see that it seems to be promising, it seems like you're gonna get a checkmate there. Otherwise, just don't do it. Just focus on your development first, then you build your strengths, and then you're ready to attack. It's like, imagine you want to rob a bank. You have two choices. You can go there immediately, just on your own, with a screwdriver in your hand and hope for a success. Or you can just come up with a plan, you can get a few of your friends, you can get, well, really professional tools for that matter, and then being fully prepared, go there and take what's yours. Or maybe not really yours, but you get the point. In chess, it's the same. You can just take a few of your pieces and go on, or you can fully mobilize first and then be ready for a crucial attack and then destroy your opponent completely. Here, it's an exception. It works because we have these two dominating pieces, a huge combination of pieces, queen and knight, against just one king. There is absolutely no defenders for it. Let's say king g8, we go queen h5, and then we threaten a checkmate. All of the pieces are far away from the king. I mean, this rook is near, but it's rather a problem than doing something good. Well, maybe just protecting the pawn. But checkmate is coming, there is no proper solution against, and black must resign. That is an exception, but normally you have, well, roughly the balance between the pieces, because your opponent is also developing it. And then if you are just attacking with a few against the entire army of your opponent, that's not going to be successful. That is why it's essential to develop all of your pieces, and if you spend just one move on one piece, you can do it as active as possible and as fast as possible. Now back to the game. My opponent wasn't that careless, and he didn't just castle here, because because, well, that might be really dangerous after e5. So instead, he played knight to d7, which is developing yet another piece, so of course that's a useful thing for black to do. Now I'm playing knight b to d2, and that is exactly a very good example for this idea that you attack when you are not ready for it. I could have played e5 here immediately, but then the knight goes to d5, and notice how many pieces my opponent has already developed, where I still don't have a lot, and I have difficulties with developing a new piece, because I would be happy to play knight b d2 to get to e4 or c4 later on, but unfortunately it's gonna run into knight f4, and I'm basically losing immediately on the spot here. So please do not do that. Instead of going all in into the attack when you're still not ready, try to bring all of your forces and then go on. So that's exactly what I decided to do. I play knight b to d2. First of all, it protects the pawn. Secondly, it's developing the knight. And thirdly, this knight might go to some very, very good promising squares after I play e5 or just immediately. And here is the moment in this game where the whole craziness begins. My opponent plays queen b8. And when you see this move, you are thinking like, oh my god, what is going on here? So this queen is definitely looking all the way towards my king, and it says, well, I'm ready, I want to deliver you a checkmate. So of course you should be careful about it. At the same time, you shouldn't just go crazy immediately and ruin all of your plans for the game, because, you know, the best way to deal with the problem is to understand that it's not a problem. Like, yes, the queen is active here, it's keeping an eye on the square on h2, but it's not that dangerous yet. There are no threats, so it's not like you should immediately stop all of your plans. You need to acknowledge what your opponent is doing and decide whether it's dangerous for you. If it is, then of course you need to do something about it. But if it doesn't, just go on with your plan. That is what I did. My plan was to develop my knight to c4, and from here it has various ideas. Remember the multi-purpose strategy, so it supports this move on e5, which was one of my main ideas, and then it also has the idea to go to a5, because from here I'm attacking this bishop, and I would be happy to exchange my knight for a bishop. First of all, I get a pair of bishops, and that is a huge advantage in such an open position. And secondly, if he goes back, then this bishop is not that great, because, well, that's one of the best pieces black has, and if it has to go back, you waste a lot of time. Remember, one piece, one move, and, well, it's not that great anymore. And my knights, yeah, you might be wondering, it's staying there not that great, but first of all, it might jump to c6 in some crazy variations, or if necessary, just come back with another tempo, attacking another knight, so I wouldn't waste that much time. But it's crucial for me to do something about this bishop on b7, at least I thought so, so I wanted to really attack it. And my opponent plays knight to g4, well, seemingly creating some threats here, which brings us to the second golden rule that you need to follow in your games to improve your chess immediately. Do not create non-existing problems. That's exactly what so many less experienced players are doing. They're creating those problems here and there, thinking that, well, this knight is coming, I'm gonna get checkmated in a few moves. Oh my god, what's going on? Let's do something about it. And then they do something really silly and lose the game afterwards because of that. So you need, even though it might feel scary, you need to think objectively about it, whether it's really dangerous for you or not. Because, well, I thought, of course, about just playing h3, because, well, this guy is coming to g4, what it's doing, what does it want from me, I can just kick it away and that's all. But then I realized, by the way, the engine actually says it's the best move, but from a practical point of view, I'm not agree with him, because there is a move h5, and then you cannot take it back. And this queen is coming all the way here to g3. It feels like a brilliant move here. Like, I was going to play knight a5, I was calculating this exact variation, then I thought, but what if the queen comes here, and then if I take the bishop, the engine still doesn't understand, yeah, but now he gets to the point that after knight a5, basically I'm in a huge trouble here, because checkmate is coming, I can take another bishop, doesn't help, takes, checkmate. I can take this guy, I can take all of his pieces, but he's still delivering me a checkmate, because he always has enough pieces just to do that. Well, I can still survive here with king h1, and then some crazy variations are going on, bishop takes, then queen d2, the only move, but still black is better. That's absolutely not what I want to achieve in this game. So I thought here, if after h3, h5, I'm still not really threatening to take the knight, because, well, if I take it, that's gonna open up the file. Now black is much better. then I don't need to play h3 in the first place. It just creates those additional opportunities for him. He has this queen g3 suddenly. Why would I need that? So instead, I decided to go for my plan, which was to attack that bishop. And yes, you might say, but you're broken your golden rule of development. Yes, I do. I'm making this third move with the knight. But remember, you are allowed to do that only if you have a very, very concrete and a good reason to do that. I have it here. Well, you might ask me, well, but Evgeny, I understand your point, but how to understand whether it's a good reason or not a good reason? Well, this bishop is essential for black's attack. I felt like if I can get rid of it, just exchanging it, or if it has to go away, I'm going to achieve so much. So I play knight a5. The knight is secure because it can always go back. I mean, I'm not risking to lose it. And then I just want to take it. And then, yeah, knight a5, like this crazy move, checkmate is coming and so on. But I'm not scared of that, because I have taken a look at what my opponent can do, and I have prepared my answer about it. So if the threat, it seems to be scary for you, but you know a very simple way to deal with this threat afterwards, then you shouldn't care about it. Like, I shouldn't do anything about 95 just yet, and I can do my stuff if I'm prepared to face it with something really, really good and something that would make sure that I'm fine. And I do have here the move bishop f4 in every possible variation when this knight comes to e5, because now the knight is pinned. You can only take it here with the check, but then I take it back, attacking here, attacking there. Everything is perfect here for white. So I just played knight to a5, and I thought that of course I want to take it, and if the bishop goes back, and now I play h3 and he answers with h5, it's like I could have done it before, but then after knight a5, instead of that crazy move queen g3, which I hope you remember, he suddenly plays bishop c8 back, which is a very passive move. So I thought I'm making a huge progress if I start with the move knight to a5. My opponent decides that it's going to be too passive to go back, spending so much time, and the bishop is very passive and so on. So he just plays h5 anyway, so that this knight is protected in all possible variations afterwards. And I said, well, I have saved my time with the move h3, I rather attacked this bishop, and now I'm happy to take it because you remember, two bishops is just a dream for me in such an open position. That is a huge advantage, and this game is a perfect example because so many people are asking me, okay, you're always saying two bishops are so great, but how to use it in an actual game? How to, get something out of it? Well, here is a perfect example for that. So I'm taking it. And here you can stop the video for a second. Very instructive to find here the next move for white. Very, very important. I hope you have found it. So the thing about two bishops, they are extremely powerful if the position is opened. If you have some chances to explode the position, to have some active diagonals for your bishops. Of course, if they're horribly passive, then you can be happy all day about having two bishops. It's not bringing you anything at all. So right now my dark squares bishop has some prospects, and yes, I could just develop it, but my light squares bishop doesn't really have any good prospects, any good squares to go. But if I play this tricky move e5, then I create such an opportunity for my bishop. Bishop e4 is suddenly a huge threat, and this way I make sure that both of my bishops are going to be as active as possible, and then I can take the full advantage of this move. Now, it's very important to make it right now, because I analyze so many games with my students, with some people who are low rated, and they're saying, yes, when I suggest some moves that I think are great, they say, well, I have made it, but just later on in the game. Well, unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. You have this one opportunity right now, and you have to use it. Because otherwise, if I start with bishop f4, for example, my opponent can play e5 himself, and then I no longer have this opportunity. Maybe in this concrete case, it's not a problem because now I have an additional opportunity for this bishop, but you got my point. It might be the case that you're just wasting one tempo and then the opportunity is gone. So very important to use it in the right moment. So back to the game, I'm playing e5 and threatening to play bishop e4 and win the exchange. Now, something very weird happened because my opponent played queen to c7, attacking that pawn. I said, okay, I wanted to develop my bishop, finally finishing my development. At least the minor pieces, the knights and the bishops, that is the first thing you should focus on the development. Once you are ready with that, you should proceed with the major pieces. And here he suddenly plays queen a7. So he just wasted those moves with a queen here and there. And one piece, one move rule applies not only to the opening, but also in the middle game. If you are just taking one piece and making too many moves with it, it's not a great strategy because the entire position besides this one piece is not changing at all. Whereas your opponent might be developing all of his pieces and then suddenly you have just maybe placed one of your pieces perfectly, but on the other hand, your opponent has 5 pieces to fight against it, so it's just not reasonable from your side. That is exactly what my opponent is doing here. And I decided I need to finish my development. Obviously, I cannot develop this rook because it is there protecting that pawn. So I have developed this one. I thought for a long time whether it should go to C file or to the D file. The most important thing, of course, is that the rooks, they love the open files, so you should always find or try to create those open files for the rooks. But if you have a choice between two, well, I wasn't really sure which one is better. I wanted to maybe put some pressure on this guy because I thought if the rook goes somewhere, maybe I can take that because then go back, attack here the king, pin the knight, and so on. But rook c1 was also possible. Now, my opponent plays king to e7, which is kind of a mysterious move. You don't know what to expect out of it. And here we come to the third crucial action that you need to take to improve your chess game today. But before I reveal it to you, I want to give a few words to the sponsor of this video, Journey to Grandmaster. Yeah, it's me. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. When you have the initiative, use it. First world chess champion Wilhelm Stanitz said that if you have the initiative, you must use it, otherwise it's gonna disappear. It's not just like an extra material, extra pawn or extra bishop, that no matter what you are doing, as long as you are not blundering any pieces, that's going to be there for you. But the initiative, you should just give a few tempi to your opponent and he's going to be able to stabilize the situation, finish his development, and then your initiative is gone. So you must use this exact moment, especially when you have finished your development. Look that every single one of my pieces is doing something useful here. The bishops are active, this bishop is very active, controlling both diagonals, this rook is very active, the queen is there protecting and attacking at the same time. This rook, it hasn't really been developed yet, but it's also doing a very important function. It's protecting that pawn on f2, so I can say that all of my pieces are doing some work. That's essential. Now, to use your initiative, you need to take advantage of the fourth thing that you absolutely need to implement into your chess game. Namely, use the 4 steps system formula to find the best move both for you and for your opponent. Here is the 4 steps system formula: checks, captures, threats, and active moves. Before you go through all of those steps, you don't consider anything else. Just never. If you are gonna take just one thing out of this very useful video, please take this one. Because if you do that, first of all, you're gonna eliminate 99% of all of the blunders you ever make in chess, and secondly, you're gonna find so many more great moves in chess that you currently do. So, you need to go in this specific order. What are the checks here available for me? The only check I see here is bishop to g5. Well, you're not just blindly make it, you're not like, well, I have a check, let's go for it and be happy. No, you try to understand what's gonna happen next, what kind of opportunities your opponent has, and here you once again start with the same 4 steps system formula. Of course, if you give him a check, normally he doesn't have a way to give you a check, although there are exceptions. But he can be still active, like, don't think that he's gonna just escape and be very passive. No, always start with the most active opportunities, and he has a way to create a threat against you. He can play f6, then what do you do about it? Well, you take it, he takes it back, and you go away. that was my idea, because here the bishop is protecting that pawn just in case. So for example, this rook might be activated, and it's also putting an eye on that king on e7. Once again, multi-purpose piece. It's so great. Always try to use as many pieces as you can possibly do with some multi-purposes. Now, even though that feels like a really cool variation for white, and I have calculated during the game, I have failed to do it. Why? You're gonna ask me, well, because I thought, let me just attack that knight first, because, well, I'm just threatening to win it now. There are no checkmating ideas. If he takes it back here, the h-file is not that dangerous anymore. So once it goes back, then I'm gonna attack it, and then it's going to be even more powerful, because after takes, I might even ignore the fact that my bishop is hanging and play bishop c4 immediately, creating some horrible checkmate ideas, and that was my plan. But once I played h3, my opponent was very happy to take that pawn on f2, just exchanging his two pieces against the rook and the pawn. And somehow I underestimated it. I thought that that can never be good, because as a result of it, I get two bishops for a rook and a pawn. But I mean, that's crazy. Two bishops are so strong. And while all of that is true, in the other variation, I was basically just winning on the spot. So that's even better. Of course, from a practical point of view, that's a cool endgame for me. I was right about it, and I have converted it into a full point. But later on, I have lost almost all of my advantage due to imprecise moves, because the position is actually pretty complicated. So please always start in that specific order and not the other way around. Checks always come first. Okay, so back to this very instructive endgame. Everything is going off the board. Now we have this endgame, and my opponent plays knight to c5 immediately. Now, feel free to pause the video and find a good move for white in this position, because it feels like an incredibly one, and I have failed to find the best move. That is how complicated chess is, because there are so many ways white can continue. Of course, you see that this pawn is hanging, the bishop is under attack, those rooks are definitely coming into the center of the board, so you feel that black starts to get some momentum. And here you should be very careful, because if you allow all of that, then, well, your advantage might be gone. And even though initially you have a very good starting position, you have two bishops, but you still need to prove that it really matters here. So I spent quite a lot of time here and played the move knight to d4, which seemed like an active move. I mean, the knight wasn't doing much on f3, and here it's creating some difficulties. For example, rook d1, which was a little bit scary for me, creating that pin, because notice that might be a huge threat. Let's say if I play a5, you play rook d8, and then I cannot just go here, because my opponent is gonna take it, and then play knight to d3 with a lot of forks here. That's not what I want to achieve from this game, not at all. So I have to be careful with that. I played knight d4. Well, if you are curious, the best move is just to go back to e2. I have calculated this as well, but to understand which one is actually the best one is very tough in such a position. It's a move back. I normally never recommend you go back, but there are, of course, exceptions. In all rules in chess, there are exceptions. That is exactly the reason why the game is so tough. So here, after knight takes, I have the move rook a1, then the knight goes back, and then I have knight d4. I mean, that is all very, very complicated. And then somehow I have a lot of ideas, but why on earth can't you just play rook c8? Yeah, because then there is bishop f3. That makes sense, because now knight comes to c6 with a check, and the rook has no squares. And if you move this rook, then I'm gonna just... No, I don't even take the pawn, because, well, you go back and then there is a pin. You see how complicated it is. I just play king e3 and I enjoy my position. But hold on a second, computer. I have just lost a pawn there on a4. I don't just want to do it. I understand that you are crazy, and you understand all of that sooner or later I'm gonna get those pawns back. But right now I just lost a pawn for absolutely nothing. I mean, that's a very high level to play on. And hopefully I'm gonna achieve that one day, but for now, let's go back to my human chess. I played here knight to d4, because here if you take, I actually have a way to immediately take the pawn back. I play knight c6 check. The king has no good squares. That was the best thing for me, that it has to block that ace rank, and the rook is not coming. That's great for me. Then I take here, then I attack there. The king is still in trouble, so that should be good for me. And also this knight on b2, yeah, maybe also wouldn't be that great. So anyway, my opponent didn't take it. Instead, he played rook a to c8, which actually didn't feel like a mistake. I thought that, yeah, what do I do now? Because, yeah, the engine once again says bishop e1 or just bishop f1, and everything is great for white, but I mean, knight takes, this rook is very active, this pawn is hanging. how on earth it's just so winning for white? Difficult to understand. What I did was to play b3. I just wanted to protect my pawn and say that, okay, I always have those two pieces for a rook, so I must be better here. But it turns out this position after knight takes d3 is almost equal there. Rook h to d8, and I no longer have two bishops. I thought that, well, I can always go here, and everything is great for me, but it turns out the engine says it's actually not that clear anymore. That is how tough it all is. Anyway, my opponent just played rook to d8 immediately, and then I felt like if I have a chance, I want to save my bishop. I love two bishops, and I thought about it during the game, of course, that I want to show my viewers how you use the power of two bishops in chess, so I really wanted to find a way to save the bishop. I came up with the best move in my opinion, bishop to c4, because it's the most active move, it's protecting the pawn protects the bishop is stable, and I'm good to go. And once I'm making this move, I'm just noticing, oh my god, I have just completely blundered knight takes a4, and that would spoil the whole thing for me, because the knight is so active, it's coming to b2, it's coming to c3, if I take it, then the rook is coming, my opponent wins a pawn again, and then I'm in trouble. And of course, my opponent is a very tough guy, he did it immediately. It turns out it's not that bad for me. It's actually very good, and bishop c4, as you could have seen, is a great move, and sometimes you get lucky like that, but I would prefer seeing the opportunity of knight takes a4. There is a chance, though, that I wouldn't make the move bishop to c4 in this case, and then I would spoil my advantage, so I really got lucky in this moment. But the way it works, I fortunately found the right move here, is bishop takes a6. And the reason I found it, because I followed the 4-steps system formula. I'm thinking about the most active move available for me. I do have one check, that's bishop g5, but it doesn't help because after f6 my bishop is in trouble. Then I'm thinking about captures. I can capture the knight, but that's just an exchange. That's, by the way, a very important distinction. If you just exchange the pieces, it's not the same thing as a capture, as when you truly take something and your opponent can just take it back, because exchange normally is not part of active moves. And while, of course, that could be a valid option for you in the chess game, you shouldn't make the priority of making an exchange as high as checks, captures, and threats. Okay, anyway, I took here on a6, and very important variation that after knight c3, that is what happened. My rook is hanging here, so I have absolutely no time to take the rook on c8. I have to play rook d3, because knight d2 runs into knight d4 check, and here after this check and knight c5, that was once I noticed that I'm blundering knight a4, I immediately started to calculate this exact variation, and then thank god I have found that after takes, I still have knight to c8, a fork here, and everything is fine, I'm a piece up in the end of the day. So my opponent did play knight to c3, I played rook to d3, but here instead of knight to e4, he played the move rook to c5. And that brings me to the fifth thing that you must always do in your chess game if you want to bring your chess into the next level. Never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do afterwards. Now, what I can actually do in this position and what my opponent obviously missed, that's up to you. That is a fantastic move, maybe one of the best I have ever made in my life. I really hope you found it. I mean, take your time, don't be in a hurry. That's incredibly instructive moment. Okay, I have given you enough chances. The brilliant move is knight takes e6. That is just crazy. I mean, everything is hanging suddenly. I'm attacking both of those rooks right here. I'm attacking that rook with the rook here. The knight is hanging twice, but you cannot take it, because if you take with the king, obviously the rook is hanging. If you take with the pawn, then I have bishop g5 and once again win the rook back. So that's just a crazy move. I mean, optically, once I saw it, I was just amazed of the beauty of it. Of course, I still made sure that it works for me. Remember the rule number 5, never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do. So I was calculating the variations, but it just immediately felt for me that that's going to be a fantastic move, and finally I made it. And then I took here, well, black basically has to take here because otherwise you lose some material. Then I take it back. And then this exchange actually simplifies the position quite a lot for me. I still have a huge advantage. That is, of course, a good principle for you. If you have a material advantage, exchange as many pieces as possible, because it makes it so much simpler for you to convert that advantage into a full point. And it makes it much more difficult for your opponent to create some source of counterplay, because if you are some material down, you must create some counterplay, some threats for your opponent, otherwise you're not going to survive. He simply has more pieces. So the more pieces I exchange, the more I limit my opponent's potential. So he plays rook d1. Now he still has 2 active pieces, and he tries to do some tricks about it, but it's much simpler to deal with 2 active pieces than with 3. So I'm playing here knight to d3. I'm coming back with my knight. I'm attacking the pawn on b4, which is a weakness. He plays knight to d5. I play bishop g5 check, because I have here, after the exchange, that square on h6, which I thought is great for me. I'm controlling everything, but at the same time, my bishop is so far away that no hidden forks here would win it. And this bishop, actually, those bishops are beautifully placed there on the different sides of the board, and you cannot attack it, you cannot do anything about it. They are standing just beautifully. King to d6, and now another tactic which hopefully would be simpler for you to find, white to move. I thought, of course, you might say, well, you can just start with the check, bishop f8, and then you attack that pawn, and then you take it back. The only problem with that is that there is always this move rook to d2 that I didn't want to allow. So what do? I just start with the move knight takes b4, because here that square is still covered, and if you take that, then I give you a check, the king goes away, and then I take the knight and once again cover that square on d2. So I don't even give you any chances of counterplay. That's very important. No matter how much extra material you have, you always need to keep an eye on your opponent's counterplay, because you should never think like, well, I can win this game, whatever happens, my opponent has absolutely no chances. You know how many games I won from a completely desperate situation? I mean, that's proven for me always and always. First of all, if my opponent is much better, I should never give up and go on and look for those opportunities, and so often it pays off. And then the second one is, when I'm much better, I still always need to be careful. As long as my opponent doesn't press the clock button saying that he resigns or he's ready to congratulate me, I need to stay focused and look for his opportunities. So knight takes b4, he plays knight c3, I just play bishop c4, because at least I thought everybody is protecting everybody, I cannot lose anything, this bishop is so far away that it cannot be attacked, everything is great. Knight d3, bringing the knight back, covering that b2 square, not giving my opponent any attacking chances at all. Bishop f4, now it seems like it's time for me to push that password, because remember, you have the passwords in the endgame to push it, to use it. You don't just sit on it and like you have your money and you're happy about it. No, your money should work for you. It's the same way your password should work for you. You should move it forward and either just make a new queen or deflect your opponent pieces from something more important. My opponent still tries to be tricky and create a few threats, so knight d4 check, rook f1 check, and rook to g1. Now, I am just giving a check first, because the king cannot go here and block the pawn because of bishop e3 and I'm winning the rook. So he goes away here to d7, and here is the last instructive moment of the game. How will you play as white here? Definitely have different opportunities, and yeah, it might be tempting to somehow push the pawn even further, but it's not that simple, because this king is gonna go back and your pawn is still hanging with the check. Anyway, the simpler thing you can do here is to play knight to e1. That is a very nice thing, because the rook is absolutely stuck now. It cannot go anywhere, the pawn is protected, and the rook is not coming back. So once I saw this move, I was absolutely thrilled by it and couldn't resist but making it. My opponent played rook h1. Well, very important that after knight c3 check, there is king f2, and I'm attacking that rook here, and the rook has to go away, but then I have time to stop my opponent's threats. My opponent started with rook h1 and thought, well, now knight c3 is a threat, and if I'm not careful, then he might annoy me with that, but I just played bishop e5. Notice how perfect this bishop is here, controlling all the squares. Always limit your opponent's opportunity. That is truly amazing when you do that, and your opponent should feel sad because he has absolutely nothing to do. Here my opponent threw me a pawn here with f4, threatening some checks, at least trying to be active. I just took it because I decided enough is enough, it's time for me to collect some material. He plays knight c3, and here the king just comes to d3. My opponent finally resigns because there is absolutely nothing he can do here. So here you have it, 5 things that you can implement immediately into your games, and please share your results with me once you do it. But you know what decides the destiny of 99% of all chess games? The calculation. I want to help you improve your calculation skills, so I have prepared a dedicated video for that right here, so you can bring your calculation to a completely new level and then blow, together with the knowledge we got here, completely blow your opponents away.